Good morning, students. Good morning to all. And last day we have studied about the international economics, and we have studied the subject matter of the international economics, and after that studied the meaning of trade and the types of trade. So today also just we will remind what we have studied on last day, and today also just go to the next chapter. So last day just we studied the subject matter of international economies. So what are the matters, what are the subject matters will come to on the international economics. So first one is pure theory of trade. So in this international economics, the pure theory of trade of one of the components are there. These components explain the causes for foreign trade. In what cause or in what reasons the foreign trade was appeared or arranged, and the compositions, direction and volume of trade. So what are the compositions are there, and in which directions the foreign trade will go and move, and the volume of trade. Volume of trade means so in the terms of trade. So and the determinations of the terms of trade and the exchange rate issues related to the balance of trade and balance of payment. So what are the trade, what are the issues will come into the balance of trade and the balance of trade, everything we will study in the concept of or in the components of theory of trade or pure theory of trade. So next one is policy issues. So under this part, the policy issues such as free trade versus the protections and the methods of regulating trade and the capital and technology flows, how the capital and technologies flows from one nation to another one of the nations, and the use of taxations. What are the use are there in these taxes? What are the use of the taxes are there in this international trade? And what are the subsidies and dumping is followed in the international trade, and the exchange control and the convertibility of foreign aid and the external borrowing and foreign direct investment, everything we will study in the policy issues. Next, international cartels and blacks. So many of the cartels and the blacks also there. So this part, the international cartels and the trade blacks deals with the economic integration in the form of international cartels, custom unions and monetary unions. So after that we have studied the trade. So the term trade means the exchange of goods and services among the peoples. Normally we have studied about the trade. It means the exchange of goods and services from the producer to consumers. So this is also one type of the trade. This here also we will study how the trade will moving from one place to another one of the place. So in this trade we can classify it as a two types. First one is internal trade and the international trade. So the internal trade refers to the exchange of goods and services within the boundaries of one nation. So the international trade refers to the exchange of goods and services within the political and geographical boundaries of one nation. For example, if the trade takes place within the boundaries of the India only, is called international trade. So what are the product is produced in India, it will be consumed by the Indian people only. So that is called internal trade. Next, international trade. The international trade refers to the exchange of goods and services between two or more countries. For example, the multinational companies are producing any of the commodities from one nation, but it will be going to consume by throughout the world. Like that, some of the product is produced by one nation, but this product is going to export to the another nations and consumed by throughout the world wherever this commodity is going to import. And we have studied about some of the relationship between the internal trade and the external trade. Okay students, if I explaining the difference between the internal trade and international trade, it will take more time. So just you study yourself, you could understand, I think. So next we will go to the theories of international trade. So many of the theories are there in this international trade. So the classical theory and the mercantilism theory and the free trade theories and the free trade refined theories also is there. So in this classical theory, first one is the classical theory of international trade. So even in the classical theory of international trade, the three types of the trades are there. So the absolute cost advantages and the comparative cost advantages and the two type of the advantages are there. First, the classical theory of advantages. So the Adam Smith developed the theory of absolute cost advantages. So in this classical theory of international trade, first we will study about the absolute cost advantages. So the absolute cost advantages is developed by Adam Smith in 1776 and it was formulated as an explicit and precise theory by the David Ricardo. After that, this theory is improved by so many of the economists like J.S. Mill, Tashik and Haberler. So according to the Adam Smith, the absolute cost advantage. So Adam Smith argued that all the nations can be benefited when there is free trade and specialization in terms of their absolute cost advantage. According to the Adam Smith, if any of the nations has the free trade and if their absolute cost advantage, so or if they having the specialization in terms of their absolute cost advantages, so all the nations will can get the benefited. One nations must be has the free trade and it will be get the specialization in terms of their absolute cost advantage. Absolute cost advantages mean one nations must have the possible to produce any of the commodities with least cost advantage, least cost. If any of the nations has more resources and by using these more resources, it can produce any of the commodities with the low cost and in this nation has the free trade. So all the nations can get the benefited. So according to Adam Smith, the basis of international trade was absolute cost advantage. So how the international trade is going to happen means on the basis of absolute cost advantages only. Absolute cost advantages mean if any of the nations have the possibilities to produce any of the commodities with low cost and if they produce more, it will come to a international trade. So the trade between two countries would be mutually beneficial when one country produces a commodities at an absolute cost advantages over the other countries. For example, if two nations are there, India and America, and the India has the possibility to produce the wheat within 1 rupees and the America also has the possibilities to produce the same wheat as in the 2 rupees. But in the other hand, if the India has the possibility to produce the 2 rupees for producing cloth and the controversy, the America also has the possibility to produce the 1 unit of cloth in 1 rupees mean. So the India and America will come to an international trade dealings. So which in turn produces another commodity at an absolute cost advantage over the first country. For explaining this theory, so we must take out of assumptions. So what are the assumptions we have to taken means first there are two countries and two commodities. For explaining these absolute cost advantages, we have to assume so there are two countries and two commodities. Two countries and two commodities mean the two countries only are going to involving in this international trade and the two countries also producing the two commodities only. For example, wheat and cloth. The both countries are producing cloth and wheat only. So next, labor is only factor of productions. So the labor is only the factor of productions. labor is only factor of production means, so 4 factor of production will be using to produce the commodities, but we have to assuming the labor only is the factor of production, there is no capital and other factor of productions. By using the labor only, the two nations are going to produce or achieving the productions. Next, labor units are homogeneous. So all the unit of labor will be the homogeneous. The labor in India and the labor for the America also will be the homogeneous. The power and the ability and the skills will be the same. Next, the fourth assumption, this is the important assumption. So the cost or the price of a commodity is measured by amount of labor required to produce it. So we have to assuming the cost or price of a commodity is measured by amount of labor required to produce it. How many labors, how much amount of labor is going to involve to produce any of the commodity, that is the amount for the price of a commodity. This is the main assumption. So next, there is the no transport cost. Okay, but now in this international trade, the transport cost is considered on the basis of the constitution of every nation, but there is no transport cost. So the 5 assumptions must be taken out to explaining the theories. So now we can explaining the absolute cost advantages by seeing this schedule itself at first. First, just when we are seeing this schedule, we can clarify it. So the country is mentioned in one column and the two nations, the India and China, are mentioned in another one of the columns. So India, when India produced the wheat, the 20 unit of labor, the 20 unit of labor is going to produce. Next, the China also, so India can produce 20 unit of wheat per unit of one labor, and the China also can produce the 8 labor per unit of output. So here next to the cloth, the India also can produce the 6 unit of output per one labor. Next to the China also produced the 14 unit of cloth. So we can easily clarify it by 1 unit of labor. So India can produce 20 unit of wheat. So China also produced the 8 unit of wheat per using one labor. So the same, the India also can produce the 6 unit of cloth per unit of one labor. The China also can produce the 14 unit of cloth per unit of labor. So from that illustrations, so it is clear that India has an absolute advantage in the production of wheat over China. And China also has an absolute advantage in the production of cloth over India. So therefore, India should specialize in the production of wheat and import cloth from China. So like that, China also have the possibilities or should specialize in the production of cloth and import wheat from India. So this kind of trade would be mutually beneficial to the both India and China. So now when we are seeing the diagram, you can easily understand. So India can produce the 20 unit of wheat and 6 unit of cloth by using 1 unit of labor. So like the China can produce the 14 unit of cloth and 18 unit of wheat by using 1 unit of labor. So now the India has more power or more specialized skill to produce the wheat, but it has not specialized skill to produce the cloth. But in the same time, so the China has more power to producing the specialized skill to produce the cloth and less specialization to produce the wheat. So now the India can export the wheat to the China. So instead of that, so it can easily import the wheat. So the India also can export the wheat to the China instead of cloth. So here, so which nation has the more powerful to produce any of the commodities? That product has to be export to the another nations, and which product is not able to produce with the absolute cost advantage, it can import. So on the basis of absolute cost advantages only, so the nations are come to the international trade. Next, comparative cost advantage. The comparative cost advantage is developed by the David Ricardo. He is the British economist. He is published one his book, so the principle of political economy and the taxations. So in this book, he formulated a systematic theory. It is called comparative cost theory. So the comparative cost advantages. So the Ricardo demonstrates that the basis of trade is the comparative cost differences. In other words, trade can take place even if the absolute cost differences is absent, but there is comparative cost difference. So even if there is no absolute cost advantage, so by comparing the cost advantages with another nations, so if the nations are thinking it is better to import from another nations, it will come to an international trade. So according to Ricardo, a country can gain from trade when it produces at relatively lower cost. So even when a country enjoys absolute advantages in both goods, the country would specialize in the production and export of those goods which are relatively more advantageous. Even when there is absolute cost advantages, and when we are comparing to the advantages or the cost advantages with the another nations, if the nations are thinking it is very beneficial to import from another nations, it will import from others. So when a country has absolute disadvantages in production of both goods, the country would specialize in production and export of the commodity in which it is relatively less disadvantageous. So for explaining these comparative cost advantages, we have to take some of the assumptions. So there are only two nations, two commodity. The two nations only are there. The two nations also going to produce two commodity. Next, labor is the element. So labor is the only element of cost of production. The cost of production is mentioned by the labor only. So all laborers are the equal efficiency. So the labor in the both nations also will have the same efficiency. So next, the labor is perfectly mobile within the country, but perfectly immobile between countries. So on the basis of demand, it will be perfectly mobile, but it is perfectly immobile between the countries. Next, the production is subject to the law of constant returns. The production is subject to the law of constant returns means even if the labors are going to increase, so the constant returns only will be get. Next, foreign trade is free from all barriers. So there is no barriers, no tax policies, no constitutions, and there is no any of the barriers. Next, no change in technology. So what technology is going to use to produce any of the commodities in one nation? So it will be no change. It is a permanent one. So no transport cost. So as I said in first theories, there is no transport cost. Next, the full employment will be there in both nations. Next, the no government interventions. So there is no government interventions within the two nations international trade. So next, the illustrations. The Ricardo's theory of comparative cost can be explained with the hypothetical example production cost of cloth and wheat in America and India. So comparative cost advantage also can be easily explained by seeing this scheduled. So one column is mentioned the countries, and the next column is cloth, next is wheat, and next is domestic exchange ratio. So this is the important. On the basis of the exchange ratio only we can get good the comparative cost advantage. So here just to see, when you are seeing the diagram and the schedule, we can get one of the evident from the example. So India has an absolute advantage in production of both cloth and wheat. See, so the India also can have the power to produce the cloth by 90s labor and the wheat. So when we are producing the wheat and the cloth, they will get the absolute cost advantage. But however, India should concentrate on the production of wheat, in which she enjoys a comparative cost advantage. So when we are producing any of the commodities, when we are producing the wheat by using the 80 labors, so it will be produce more wheat and it will be export to the America. So instead of producing the cloth India itself, it can import from the America, because we have to comparing the cost advantage. So 80 by 120 is less than 90 by 100. So when India is going to produce the wheat at 80 unit of labor, and in the same time the India is producing the 90 unit of labor, 1 unit of labor per 90 labors, but in the same time the America is producing 1 unit of cloth by using the 100 unit of labor. So there is no more disadvantages. Okay, so even if the India is going to produce the 1 cloth of wheat by using the 80 unit of labor, so the America also using the 120 unit. So the India can produce the wheat and it will be exported to the America. But instead of producing the cloth by using the 90 unit of labor, so it will be import from the America, because when we are comparing the advantages with the America, so the America will not get the more disadvantages. So by seeing the less disadvantages, so the America can import the cloth to the India. So in the same time, so the America have to be in need of more disadvantages by producing the wheat. So it will be export. So it will be produce the, so the India can produce the wheat and it will be export to the America. So for America, the comparative cost advantage is lesser in cloth productions. So hence America will specialize in the production of cloth and export it to India in exchange for wheat. So here we have to note one thing. In trade, India can get 1 unit of cloth and 1 unit of wheat by using its 160 labor units. So by using the 160 unit of labor only, so the India can get the 1 unit of wheat by using the 1 unit of cloth. For getting this benefit, India will have to use 170 units of labor. So like that, America also gain from this trade. So with the trade, America can get 1 unit of cloth and 1 unit of wheat by using 200 units of labor. Otherwise, America will have to use 220 units of labor for getting 1 unit of cloth and 1 unit of wheat. Because the cost differentiation, the domestic exchange ratio is for unit, the 1 wheat is equal to 1.2 cloth. 1 wheat is equal to 0.088 cloth only. So we have to arrange more labor to producing the cloth in India. So the America also have to arrange more labor to produce 1 unit of wheat. So the India has to concentrate to produce more wheat and it can able to export to the America. The same time the America can produce the more cloth and it will be export to the India. So when we are comparing the cost with one another, if a nations are feeling it will be better, so the nation must be come to the international trade. So like that, just you see. So the America also will have the more power to 1 unit labor. So 100 unit of labor for cloth. The India also has the power 80 unit of labor per unit of wheat and the 90 labor required per unit of cloth. But here no more difference between the 90 and 100. So the America is also producing the 1 unit of cloth by using the 100 unit of labor. But the India also producing the 90 unit of labor by producing 1 unit of cloth. So when we are comparing the advantage cost, there is no more disadvantages for America to produce the cloth and import export to the India. So here the America also has the more labor required to produce 1 unit of wheat, but India also has the less labor required to produce 1 unit of wheat. So the India can produce. So India can produce the wheat, more wheat, and it will be export to the America. The same time, so the America can produce more cloth and it will be export to the India. So when we are comparing the cost analysis, when we are comparing the cost advantages, if we are feeling if it is better, so nations will come to an end. So here we have to note the two criticism. So labor cost is a small portion of the total cost. Hence theory based on labor cost is unrealistic because we must use the more factor of productions. So but this cost advantages theory only is taking into the account of labor, but it is unrealistic. Next, laborers in different countries are not equal in efficiency because then Indian people may consider as a very efficient peoples and some of the nations peoples may be the laziest peoples and vice versa. So the efficiency always will be differ in the different nations. Okay student, if you have any doubt please ask me. Tomorrow we will go to the next concept. Thank you.